Okay. Good morning, everybody. Just indicate if you can hear me all right. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to the Metro Inner Development Assessment panel this morning. My name's Clayton Hyam. I'm the presiding member, and with me I have Lee O'Donoghue, the deputy presiding member, and Mr. Peter Lee online as the third specialist member, and councillors Ingrid Van Dawson and Andrew Sullivan online. I'll declare the meeting open at 9:29 and acknowledge the traditional owners and elders past and present of the land upon which we're meeting today. Just a note that we may refer to technical devices to assist us with the information before us, and that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. There are no apologies, no members on leave of absence, and minutes from previous meetings are available on the MIDAP website. Moving to the City of Fremantle item, declaration of due consideration. Can all members confirm that they are familiar with the material before you today? Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? Yes, Ingrid.
I've submitted a impartiality interest. Thank you. We did consider this item at council, but okay, confirming that I'm here in my.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, you look like you want to.
Yes, I've also submitted the same declarations.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to the item. Sorry. Yeah. Item 4.1. This is the 12 group dwellings at Blinko Street in Fremantle. There is a presentation from Luke Parker. Mr. Parker, 3 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
The timer, by the way. I want to attempt to read messages during such an important event. Members, interest of good planning and decision making, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide this deputation. Against all lots of properties recently completed the neighbouring Montreal Commons apartment development above expectations and DA requirements. Law Public Works now complete. Safely the items that we're still working in the city to approve with regards to the corner verge works. Beyond this, conditions are very difficult. And really, who is wanting to develop infill in Fremantle at the moment? Turns out, not many. Recent research by Urbis confirms that one of multi-unit apartment developments commenced during the 24 calendar year, and not one was completed during the same time. In summary, new infill in the city of Fremantle has slowed to almost a halt. How could this be and how could this happen? Yes, the construction industry is under significant strain, but the net additional costs of approximately $80,000 per townhouse that the authorities have forced onto Montreal terraces certainly is not helping the project, which had to be withdrawn from market late last year. I thank the officers' report with regards to their support to approve the requested facade changes. Following the DA approval, what would normally have not been such a challenging component to build, builders were unable to get one subcontractor to even price the external portals, meaning a design change was unavoidable. Assuming MIDAP supports this change today, that puts to end at approximately 9 month or so process of uncertainty and costs. We've endured to process this change. I encourage all parties to consider if this really was necessary and in the best interests, reducing impediments to new housing supply. The second key item we are seeking for DA to acknowledge is the future apportionment of cash in lieu of public open space required through the associated subdivision to proponent-led public run upgrades in the area. These upgrades consist of quality landscaping and atypical wide verges and through site connections in integrated manner for streets to street improvement and usable green amenity. The total costs already committed to as part of the DA, Dobie Properties, this development is $250,000, which is far in excess of the potential cash in lieu contribution, regardless whether lower or the inflated figure is applied. This apportionment is set out in the amended advice note wording requested on page 7 of the applicant's submission. We are not seeking to delete this advice note as put forward in the RAR. This request is supported by a number of the following items. The city is concerned there is an excess of public open space in the locality. The cash in lieu is intended to be used in part towards maintenance, which is not been under 2.3. We were recommending 250 of public works as discussed. The structure plan is clear in that cash in lieu collected is generally to be put towards improvements within the structure plan area as we were requesting. And the city is putting forward that the cash in lieu is offset reduced build quality, while at the same time elsewhere stating that they believe the quality has been retained. I believe that's my time, 3 minutes. I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Luke. Questions of the presenter? Yes.
Within the body of the report, I've read that the landscaping works will come to 267,000.
Correct, yeah.
And where's the subdivision at?
So we commenced subdivision works after gaining the approvals mid last year.
Yep.
Subdivision works for the 12 lots basically completed.
So you've got provisional approval, and this matter of whether it's POS or cash in lieu is still to be resolved. Is that correct?
Yeah, we otherwise would have been able to obtain clearances and titles for lots end of last year, but that's been inhibited, and so the land is more or less a stranded asset at the moment as we are progressing to resolve the cash in lieu matter.
Okay. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up question then, I'm trying to, in my mind, understand how an advice note on a development application has any bearing on a condition of subdivision.
We're not seeking to amend the condition of subdivision. We acknowledge the advice note at its core is non-binding on the applicant. However, it exists and it is of significance. We are requesting that the beneficiary, the city, allocate this money to offset costs incurred and to be incurred on public improvements, as is contemplated under the structure plan. For that reason, we're seeking to amend the advice note to condition or to highlight that intended use. And if that were to be successful, then that allows us to then discuss with the city and presumably then move the cash in lieu in that direction so that it can go to offset costs already incurred.
Look, you've said it's non-binding, and I agree with you. Even if it's changed to the way you're suggesting, it's still non-binding, and I still don't understand then how that changes the discussion on a condition of subdivision with the city.
We've been seeking to engage the city on this item for some time, and we would like a resolution to this matter. Hence this course of action we've taken. We believe it will be viewed of significance in its form if it's approved as we've requested. But we acknowledge that it's part of the DA, and we typically tackle this through subdivision. But we are taking this approach to try and bring this to a head, and we are seeking consideration for this amended condition in the interest of order and proper planning, as is contemplated within the structure plan.
Okay.
Councillor Sullivan has his hand up too.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, presiding member. I just wanted to make inquiries, I guess, about the genesis of the developer proposing to do the verge treatment and how that came about from your perspective, and whether you consider that the verge landscaping was a condition because of other factors. So if you could respond to those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. We're committed to completing the verge and having the public access way agreement over portion of land as has been done in neighbouring development. We can committed to those factors. They total the figures already discussed, and we appreciate the importance of this public works upgrades to the structure plan area, including our proposed development. Our issue is that you add the two together with the cash in lieu contribution, whether it be the 160 or the 200 grand based on the revised valuation, and it comes to some 30% of the land purchase price. So our issue is we're committed to providing in excess of what this policy asks for. We just are seeking to not have to pay it twice, because it's just such a significant impediment to try and get this project back to viable.
Okay, further questions?
Yeah, just a follow-up question, if I may. So just to be clear, the proponent proposed the verge treatment as part of their development, correct?
Correct, and we are not seeking to change that commitment.
And the proposal was, as I understand it, in part there to allow better utilisation of the site so that you could reduce setbacks and reduce private open space requirements and the like. So it was, would it be fair to say it was compensatory for a more intensive development?
Look, there are a range of factors that contribute to the final approval. There were discretions sought and approved, and they are absolutely acknowledged. Again, we are not seeking to avoid or to not build these verge works and the seeding, so the making use of the part of the land as a public access way, as is called for under the structure plan. We're not seeking to amend any of that. But Councillor, so I think to your point, it's acknowledged that there are a range of factors that led to those works not being disputed at the time. But again, we're not seeking to change any of that. It's the double application of that contribution that we are seeking to amend.
Further questions? No? Okay, thanks. So move to the city officers. Chloe.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Probably not too much comment to make from my end, other than to perhaps return to your point that the advice note about the public open space contribution, whether it stays or goes, is really inconsequential. The matter is dealt with through the subdivision process, and the applicant did seek to have that condition reconsidered by the WAPC. The WAPC did retain the condition. And as part of council considering this amendment, including those design changes, we did also put a second recommendation to them that they not support that expenditure. So the applicant does have a formal position from council about how they would expect to see the public open space contribution expended. And there's other processes and mechanisms through the Department of Planning that the applicant would need to go through to talk this through. It may well be that they apply for clearance from us and we don't issue clearance because the payment isn't made, and they take that up with the Department of Planning. So I guess to reiterate, we are supportive of the design changes. We accept that it is very difficult to construct at the moment, and notwithstanding that our design advisory committee isn't entirely supportive of the changes, we think it's reasonable to approve this, considering there's no further planning discretion, and the DAC's commentary is to be given regard, but it is not linked to any planning discretions or significant requirements of the structure plan.
Thanks, Chloe. Questions of Chloe? Chloe, just going back to advice note 15 then. Am I correct in saying it really doesn't have any relevance at all whether it exists or doesn't exist? Correct.
It was really recommended by officers in the first place, just to flag with the applicant what the expectation would be for their development through that structure planning process, whether it's there or not. Council has provided a formal position on their expectation. Whether DAP then does the same, I'm not sure how much bearing that would have moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on now to the item. There is a recommendation for approval and an amended condition. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Sullivan, thank you. And seconder? Yes, thank you. Councillor Van Dawson, thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, presiding member. I acknowledge the difficulty of developing anywhere in the Perth metro area at the moment for higher density. It's obviously incredibly disappointing that there are many cost impositions on the developers, and they tend to be targeted at the higher density, the infill development, rather than the development that occurs out in the great flat plains. But the reality is, that is just a financial reality, and it's not a planning matter. And whilst I know our council and I know JDAP in our last meetings have tried to work with developers to come up with solutions, we can't just throw away the rule book in a tight economic environment. So it is concerning to me that so much of the quality of the development that was proposed is being stripped away. But at the end of the day, I think, as Chloe mentioned, it's still a development that passes that threshold to be approved. And I don't have any problem with, in this situation, relaxing the materiality and some of the design quality of the units in this way. I'd rather see them built than not built. When it comes to the open space, though, I fully support what the RAR demonstrated. In terms of POS, I mean, the way the normal policy applies, I mean, the site obviously is too small to generate a practical public open space. So it does, that threshold is moved on to cash in lieu. But also equally, the verge is too small and not appropriate to be considered as public open space in its own right. And there, of course, there is a very large park immediately over the road, which is public open space. But also, if you then go to the structure plans for the area, they do talk about the opportunity for green links. The two major parks that are proposed in that area are at the bottom of the hill, Booyambarra Park, and at the top of the hill, yet to be created as part of the subdivision area up the top of Swanbourne Street. And the intent of the structure plans is to say, well, we want all of the new residents in these new areas to be able to connect with those parks. That's in an east-west direction. It's not in a north-south direction. That's not required to get people to those open spaces. So the way the structure plans are structured is that the Knutsford Street link is one of the links, and as JDAP members who were in the recent one we had further south, the possibility of mid-block links going through all of those development sites is the other east-west linkage. And that's not going to be easy to create, and there's going to be a need for POS contributions along the way to deal with that. And that's why when I look at this particular proposal or request, it doesn't pass any of those local structure plan requirements, which is what the officers are also saying. So for those reasons, I can't support, as much as I acknowledge the developer's situation, there is no planning grounds to support that relaxation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you. I second all of Councillor Sullivan's comments. I don't have much to add. I had the same position, so I support the responsible authority recommendation to amend the condition 1 to allow for those facade design changes. I do appreciate the current market conditions, supply issues, cost issues, and whilst a bit disappointing we don't get the original vision and concept that was approved under the original DA, it's I think an acceptable design outcome, and love to see this developed. Similarly, to the RAR and Councillor Sullivan, I don't support deletion of the advice note. It's non-binding, a little concerned about the precedent that would set and what that signals. I think it's important that, also I was a little confused because it is more subdivision related and don't see how it actually affects anything, but a little concerned about the precedent sets from a council perspective, and I guess a DAP perspective, signalling that we support relaxation of a POS contribution, especially when sort of outside our remit being subdivision related. So I do appreciate the cost that adds, but I do think it's something that's important to retain. So I'll be supporting the RAR recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Further speakers? Yes, Lee.
Yes, look, I'll be supporting the RAR recommendation. Whilst it is a shame that the materials have to change, and that will obviously affect the facade of the proposed development, I understand the problems facing the construction industry at the moment. And quite on that note, yes, Councillor Sullivan, I was in that meeting that you referred to, and we've had this come up previously. As you know, in this instance, the provision of POS really is an unrelated matter in terms of the development application. It is a mechanism of the subdivision, and I know how when council does make a decision about where the monies will be spent, there is quite a lot of work involved in actually seeking permission from the minister to actually expend POS in particular locations. So I can't really see the relevance of placing this advice note on. I understand the logic of the proponent in doing it, but I can't see that it's actually going to achieve anything. And I also think it may set a precedent for further sorts of situations like this. But I certainly think that the POS has to be viewed separately as part of the subdivision process, and the landscaping will stay on the DA as proposed. So I'm supportive of the RAR recommendation.
Thank you. Peter, did you want to say anything?
Only that I agree with everything that's been said, but also if this scheme had been put forward first time, I'm sure it would be supported. It's an excellent scheme. I do prefer the previous one, but it's there's nothing wrong with this scheme. It's a good solution.
Thank you. Yes, I support the recommendation, although, as I've probably indicated with my questions, advice note 15 is really quite irrelevant in this process, and I was thinking of moving a deletion of that entirely and not replacing it with anything, but I think there is probably there's probably no point in doing that, because I don't think it changes anything at all. I'm just hoping, and I understand the dilemma of the developer, and it is a difficult time to develop. But really that argument is between them and the city as a result of the subdivision application, and that's a process outside this process. So I'm happy to support the RAR as it's recommended at the moment. Back to you, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I did omit to say just one thing, so I will say it just because I think it's important that we give all matters consideration, and that is that there was talk about the sort of double dipping from the proponent, but there is an alternative perspective of the double dip, which is that when a development seeks to utilise more of their site for a more intensive development, and then seeks compensation in the planning process that basically says, yeah, that's okay, you can have reduced setbacks, you can lessen some of the private open space requirements in your development and the like, then and argues strongly that well, that's going to be okay because we're going to landscape the verge, then the city, the JDAP, the decision makers are already providing that to allow for a more intensive use of the site. So there is a beneficial outcome in that, and it is tied to that. So if we were to relinquish that requirement, they would be basically getting a more intensive development without implementing the compensatory actions to allow that type of development. Perhaps a smaller number of units, perhaps smaller units themselves could have achieved an outcome without having to landscape the verge. I don't know. That's not what we're looking at. So for all of those reasons, I don't think we can agree to the proponent's request. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Just to finalise the meeting, there are no SAT reconsiderations, no SAT applications of Supreme Court appeals. Is there any general business? No. Thank you very much. And I'll close the meeting at 9:55. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.
Yeah.